Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get to it. Alright, first question. My girlfriend is overweight and has confidence issues related to her weight and looks. She hates doing cardio, and walking is all that she is willing to commit to. I've been trying to convince her to start lifting with me. She seems willing, and I think it will be better as she will see measurable progress in her lifts, which may ease her wish for instant gratification. She describes her ideal body, which seems to be the body of a female who lifts weights. I am literally in unfamiliar territory. What can we expect to see in terms of progression rate and recovery rate? Are there any programs you would recommend? Thank you. All right, brother. Yeah, the program I would recommend you maybe start her on. I have a basic lifting program for non-athletes, which is in my training playlist. I have a free programs playlist. Go check that one out. That would possibly be a good place for her to start, a good starting point. But what you're going to need to do first is get her in the gym for a month, just playing around, working on doing body weight squats, squatting to a box, core work like crunches, planks, weighted planks, things like that. Get her core built up and her mobility built up. And maybe even have her start with little light dumbbells, just doing some basic exercises like bench press rows with little 3-pound dumbbells. Just get her mobility going for 2, 3, 4 weeks and then put her into the program. That's what I'm going to recommend. Now, what can you expect in terms of progression rates? Expect her to progress about half the rate of a male, meaning women are going to, when you look at any program and the standard progression on it as far as pounds added to the bar, women are probably going to add about half the amount of weight a male will on any program. Like if you look at stuff like my novice program or any of that, it works that way. However, it'll still work off the same percentages. So if you work off percentage-based programs, expect the percentages to be pretty similar. But the thing is, when you look at a program like any of my little non-athlete programs I've run, I have a couple different ones. They're built upon just trying to add the weight as you're able to, adding a rep as you're able to, and when you get to a pre-described number of reps with good form, you just add weight. But yeah, expect her to be able to gain a half pound to a pound of muscle the first few months every single month, which will help her lose weight and lose body fat accordingly. Because as her muscles go up, she's going to require calories to build muscle, and that calories are going to have to come from somewhere. And if she's creating a calorie deficit through training and just doing walking, and walking is a great form of cardio, don't bash it. You can lose a lot of weight while walking, but it's going to be dramatically accelerated from the weightlifting. And by incorporating the weightlifting, she's not going to lose muscle as part of the weight. She's going to lose almost exclusively body fat, because normally if you just walk to lose weight, you lose a little bit of muscle with the fat that you lose. If you're gaining muscle, all of the weight that you lose is going to be fat. And so look at it this way. If you've lost 10 pounds and instead of losing 8 pounds of fat and 2 pounds of muscle, you gained 3 pounds of muscle over a period of time, you actually lose 13 pounds of fat. And that's the thing that she needs to realize, is that by weightlifting, the change on the scale is going to be a lot more fat change, not just weight change. And that's the important thing to look at. But the important thing is get her into the gym, get her started, get her interested, get her base built, and go from there. All right, next question. Can you explain the relationship between gaining muscle and fat? In theory, stimulating muscle makes getting relatively more insulin sensitive, and fitness experts talk about lean gains. Reality seems to show that muscle gains come with fat gains for the drug-free who are past the newb gains. Increasing calories appears to put the body in an anabolic state for muscle and fat. All right, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. Yeah, noobs seem to recomposition really, really easy. They gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. As you become more advanced as a lifter, unfortunately, that's no longer the case. And what you find is that eating in a surplus of calories, any calories that it's over your surplus, it isn't burned off as heat, isn't stored as muscle glycogen, doesn't turn into muscle tissue, is going to be added to your fat stores. There's no way around that. But overeating enough to gain body fat makes training easier. It lets you train harder so you can stimulate more muscle growth, and it allows the body to recover better because you're giving your body more nutrition, more calories. It's going to recover easier. It's going to let you put weight on easier, which again is going to be just conducive all around to gaining muscle. In fact, overeating produces more anabolic hormones in the body and in the muscle tissue that ensures that you gain extra muscle mass. So yeah, it's kind of a catch-22, because in theory the muscle will help you keep fat off easier, but in order to gain more muscle beyond a certain threshold, you almost need to be consuming enough food to gain body fat as well, because your recovery is better, your training is better. All the factors that you need to create the anabolic environment to gain muscle become greatly accelerated by overeating. And so unfortunately there's a catch-22 there. It is just very difficult for the non-novice to gain muscle without gaining fat. The best that you can hope for, though, is say, okay, how much do I really need to overeat to gain this muscle, and stop at that point and no more, so that you're limiting the amount of fat you gain. Because if you can, get to a point where you gain some muscle over several months and you only gain 3, 4, 5 pounds of body fat, you'll be able to diet that off really easily within a month. So you could do that over the course of several months, and then diet that fat off, or just go back to a recomp base for a little while, for a few months, and slowly burn the fat back off. It isn't necessary to actually have to gain a lot of fat to do this. You just have to be a little stricter with your overall food intake. Or you could just accept the slower route and say, I don't want to gain a bunch of fat, so I'm just not going to overeat much. I'm not going to gain more than half a pound or a pound a month at the very most, maybe even half a pound. Are you going to gain muscle even slower? Yeah, but you won't gain the fat. So it's really kind of a personal choice, and there's a catch-22 there. But yeah, being in an environment to where you're consuming enough to gain body fat at a significant rate, even if it's a modest rate, is simply a more anabolic environment for a whole host of reasons. And so it's almost unavoidable to gain muscle at a significant rate for the non-novice lifter, that they're going to have to put some fat on as they go. Drugs can obviously help with that, but even then you see a lot of big bodybuilders on a lot of drugs who are still gaining fat when they bulk. So even that's not universal. All right, next question. Does programming really matter that much for powerlifting? I feel as long as I get a decent amount of volume and training 4 days a week and really focus on the compound lifts while doing necessary accessories, I'll be good enough. Am I wrong in thinking it is that simple, or does choosing the right program really have a significant effect? All right, I'm going to get slammed for this one by a lot of coaches, but you know what the biggest factor seems to be in what your total is going to be, or what your Wilks is going to be as a power lifter? How many years of consistent training you put in without downtime or injury on a whole host of different programs. There could be 7 or 8 different types of programs, and you know what, at the end of the day, picking a good program instead of just making sure that you progress on your big compound movements and develop overall strength and size, a good program simply trims time off of that, meaning a really good program might let you do in 2.5 years what you're taking 3 to do on a different program. That's the simple reality of it for a power lifter. But ultimately, the biggest factor is always going to be years, because over the years you're going to gain strength, you're going to gain neural efficiency with consistency and years under the iron. And there's always a direct correlation between years spent powerlifting versus your actual total, your Wilks. It's the biggest factor, is always the time. So you're right, the programming doesn't matter as much as people think. Good programming just shaves some months off of the curve of what happens over the course of a couple of years. It just shaves months off. It's not necessarily going to make an enormous mind-boggling advantage, and guys just have to accept that. It's time under the iron that matters. Now, the other factor there also is your peaking program. I would say your peaking programs absolutely do matter. Your off-season, any good, consistent program is going to produce, 80 to 100% similar results to each other, depending, again, upon different factors. But your peaking programs do matter, because once you build that base, how you choose to peak and how you go into a peaking phase for a meet is really going to be the determining factor of how much of the muscle and strength that you gained are you able to actualize into effective 1-rep maxes in a competitive environment. So I would say ultimately picking your peaking programs is dramatically more important than picking your off-season programs. But a lot of different ways to look at it, a lot of ways to base build, and that's really what your off-season is just about base building ultimately. And as long as you're building that base, if you're gaining muscle and you're gaining neural efficiency on the big lifts, and you do it for enough years, you're going to be good no matter what. You're going to reach your genetic potential. All right, next question. I have a question. I followed your advice to bench with a narrow grip because I want to press without hurting my shoulders, but now I have an AC joint problems, pretty sure from benching, and my AC joint hurts from time to time. However, if I change my grip from narrow to wide, still inside the rings, I can keep my back tighter and have no shoulder pain. Should I keep benching wide? Do you have any advice for me? I'm still on your novice program and my bench sucks right now, benching 200 pounds. Cheers. All right, brother, I'm going to recommend to you that since you have an AC joint problem, that benching wide is not an option for you ever. I don't care if you occasionally get a session where you get tighter and it feels like it doesn't hurt. You need to keep the benching pretty narrow. Definitely inside the rings, but I wouldn't even touch the rings. And that's still narrow benching. I mean, if your pinkies are an inch inside the rings, you're still pretty narrow. That's probably okay. That's where I want you to stay. I don't want any part of your hand making contact with that ring if you've got an AC joint problem. You're also going to want to spend a lot of time doing pulling and rear delt work. You really need to hammer those face pulls. I would say do face pulls at least 2 or 3 sets every single training session. You need to build all of that up. Use bands if you have them available. If not, go buy some bands, but tons of band work, tons of prehab work, band face pulls, around the world, band pull aparts. You need to be doing those all the time, and I don't want you to ever touch the rings. Keep those pinkies at least an inch inside the rings the rest of your training career. Because again, the AC joint problem, you don't want to exacerbate it. And yeah, you're going to have to learn to just get tight while using a narrower grip. It's not that hard. You just need to practice doing it. Learn to set yourself up tighter on the bench. You should be able to get just as tight with your thumbs all the way on the smooths as you can on a wide grip bench. And that's something you need to remember with that. It's just a matter of practice and learning to get tight. It's because you haven't practiced getting tight with a narrower grip that's keeping you from doing so. It's not the narrow grip itself. Practice makes perfect, and you're still a 200-pound bencher, so you're still pretty much a rookie. So you still have plenty of time to learn these skills, and you also have plenty of time to train without re-injuring yourself. But yeah, if you continue to aggravate that AC joint by doing inappropriate things after you have a problem with it and an injury, by the time you get to a 300-pound bench press one day, you might really snap your shit up. So you need to be aware of that. Be careful. All right, next question. And this is the final question of the week. Would you introduce weightlifting, hunting, and carpentry into the national high school curriculum to combat the pussification of our youth? Fantastic question, and most of you guys know this is something I cover pretty routinely on my other channel, my firearm channel. I talk a lot about masculinism and masculinity. And so, yeah, the pussification of the Western male is a deep social concern for myself personally. A lot of things have changed in our school curriculum. Actually, believe it or not, up until the 50s and early 60s, a lot of schools, thousands of schools around the United States actually had marksmanship at school. People brought their rifles to class, put them in their lockers at school, and they brought guns to school, and it was never an issue. No one ever got shot, anyone ever knows of, because of people bringing their guns to school for these marksmanship courses. It was standard in most rural areas, at least. In some urban areas for high schools, it was really, really common. Tens of thousands of students brought their guns to school for that. So I don't think we could do that in today's world. So the hunting one, I would love that, and I think every man needs to learn how to hunt. I consider it an essential life skill that I don't think anyone really should avoid learning. I think it's just essential. Again, the stuff I've covered is in my rite of passage videos on my other channel quite a bit. But I don't know how we would teach hunting in school because, again, the weapons involved, the problems we have today with gangs, with violence and everything else in schools, I just don't know if that's viable without a major social restructuring first. So maybe have to throw the hunting out. But weightlifting, carpentry, mechanic courses, yeah, I think those should be mandatory. I think that to graduate high school, I would love to see people have to do something like that, either learn basic weightlifting, or again, a woodshop class, or a basic mechanical course. I think that sort of stuff is essential, not just for teaching young men how to be men again and to find some sort of craft or masculine behavior that they can partake in and take pride in, but it also will give them some basic skills they need, because honestly, most people who graduate high school today, they don't have any useful life skills. What are they going to do? That's why we have so many unskilled laborers. At least if they learn some basic carpentry or mechanical skills, if they're not being taught that by their fathers, because we have a lot of young men who don't have strong male role models. At least if they learn that from a male role model at school, they have some basic skills that they could use to get a job right out of high school, because truthfully, not everyone's going to college today. And a lot of people who go to college now have useless degrees that they can't get a job with. I mean, I know people who got 4-year degrees who couldn't even make more than $30,000 a year getting out of school if they found a job at all. And that's just ridiculous. They end up with this enormous student loan debt, 4 years of their life spent in education, and they can't even get a decent job sometimes because the reality is we have an oversaturated market with that. But what we don't have is enough people with useful life skills, trade skills, vocational skills. But yeah, I'd love to see even electronics classes would be a good. So anything that could teach people an actual craft or a skill or basic things that men need to know would be tremendously useful. So I would love to see a bigger push in vocational training, but weightlifting definitely would help, and that would help in general. I think that should be mandatory for physical education classes. At least one semester of weightlifting in there in order to graduate as part of the curriculum would be tremendously useful, not just for athletes, but for everyone. Get people used to weights. But again, finding coaches and instructors who are qualified to do it's a whole nother issue. Look how many personal trainers aren't even qualified to do that. That's a problem. I would love to see it, but again, we're going to have to put resources into that. But definitely vocational, basic mechanical and technical skills would be useful. So again, basic mechanics, wood shop and carpentry, even electronics, any of those should almost be mandatory to graduate high school for anyone who is not looking to get some sort of scholarship or isn't college bound, almost guaranteed college bound. I think some sort of vocational training should be mandatory to finish high school. That's just my opinion, though. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.